Welcome to the Am Gitmo and Guantanamo Diary Revisited film preview and discussion. We are two of your hosts, Dick Price and Sharon Kyle, the founding editors of the LA Progressive.
In the aftermath of 9/11, 779 Muslim men and boys were taken to Guantanamo Bay prison camp. As of today, 20 years later, 39 prisoners remain in custody. This evening, through the use of film and discussions with those who have firsthand knowledge, we will be given rare insight into what many detainees experienced and are still experiencing at this taxpayer-funded U.S. military prison located on the coast of Cuba, a prison the UCLA has called a catastrophic failure.
This event is hosted by Cinema Libre Studio with Pasaca Entertainment, ICUJP, and the LA Progressive, with endorsements from Addicted to War, CloseGuantanamo.org, Code Pink LA, Courage to Resist, Defending Rights and Dissent, National Lawyers Guild Los Angeles Chapter, National Religious Campaign Against Torture, and the Witness Against Torture.
We've got a tight schedule, so let me quickly run down the order of events. There will be 2 films shown tonight with an intermission. First, we'll present the film, which will be immediately followed by a discussion. Then you will have an opportunity to participate in Q&A by submitting your questions in the chat area. We'll have a brief intermission and begin the process again for the next film. We will take and capture your questions in the chat and present them to the panel. Our first offering for this evening is Am Gitmo. And to tell you a little more about Am Gitmo is Philippe Diaz, the founder of Cinema Libre and the writer and director of the film.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, it's a great honor to be with all of you and to present. Okay, unfortunately you will not see the movie because we stopped filming in August and we are in post-production. And you asked me to do something which is absolutely horrible for a filmmaker, which is to condense a 2 hours and 8-minute movie in 25 minutes. So it was very, very hard. And so, because, of course, sometimes you will have a full scene, sometimes you'll have half scene, sometimes it will be jumpy or right, left. But, so my first instinct was to say, no, let's not do that. That's crazy. It will be horrible. And after I thought that maybe we owe to the people who have been, in Guantanamo, in prison for 10, 15 years or whatever, and mainly to the people who are still there now, because a lot of people don't even know that there are still 39 people there. Maybe we owe them to do whatever we have to do. And I decided to put my filmmaker feeling in the drawer and do this 25 minutes. So I apologize. It's not final mix. It's not final score. It's not color corrected. It's not this. It's not that. It will just give you a little window of what we try to do, which is pretty much to tell the truth about what happened to these people who were pretty much kidnapped from their home in Afghanistan and other countries, delivered to the CIA for bounty most of the time, or at least a lot of the time. And CIA never checked on them, put them through questioning and torture immediately, and after send them to Guantanamo for a long-term torture program, if we can say psychological and physical. So that's what the movie is about.
بیا خداما
چرا؟
دوستان نکن بیا
چی شده؟ کجا میبرینش؟
Dad, what's going on? Whenever I saw you pack a gun and Christ on his cross, it meant you were going to a war zone.
You're right, I am.
Again? Dad, you're retired.
Well, that's true too, but we're in a major crisis, and our country needs all the help it can get.
Dad, you served your country for over 40 years. You enrolled when you were 17. Isn't that enough?
wait, where are you taking me?
Nah, the Egyptian. Good catch. Egyptian, get up.
حالا.
Where did you learn to speak English?
By you, the Americans. If you have my file, you know I volunteered during the war against the Soviets.
You tell us where Osama is and we'll let you go home.
Osama? Who's Osama?
You fought alongside bin Laden and you've continued to wage jihad since the end of the war. We know this.
I've never seen or even met bin Laden.
Bill, we've known each other for 25 years, so spare me the usual speech. What kind of shit is this? We don't do that.
We do know. You'll be dealing with high-value targets from whom we need to extract intelligence. Bin Laden and Saddam Hussein are plotting 100 more 9/11 attacks.
But this is torture. We don't torture people.
All right, everyone on the plane now. Let's go.
On the plane.
Come on, move it. Don't eyeball me.
Move it now. Hurry up.
Move
it. Come on.
Keep your eyes straight. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Move it. Move it.
Hurry up.
Move
Let's
it.
go.
Hurry up. Move it. Go. Turn around. Turn around. Come on. Get out.
Why are you hitting me? I'm answering your question.
Careful what you answer.
You have 2 little kids, right?
Are you threatening my family? Ah!
Maybe we'll learn more after we pick up your wife. Are you part of the Taliban?
No. You have no right to go after my family.
Here there is no law to protect you or your family. You have no rights. Nobody cares about you and no one knows where you are. We know you were part of the September 11th attack.
No, I was not.
كان عندي صاحب اسمه دلوار كان معانا هون الجنود ضلهم يضربوه على رجليه ويكسروا له في عظامه هو يدعي ويقول يا الله والجنود يتمسخروا عليه ويضحكوا ويضربوا ويكسروا وضلهم يكسروا في ايديه ورجليه لحد ما ارتمى وبعد هيك شالوه وصاروا يضربوه في الحيط في الحيط في الحيط وبعدين قالوا انه مات بسكتة قلبية.
No, please, sir! Stop! I can't breathe!
Terrorists like you shouldn't be allowed to breathe. Do you know how many of our people you've killed?
Stop it! Stop!
Who connected you with the 9/11 hijackers?
Nobody! I don't know anyone! Where are you taking me? No, no, please no, no, no.
Do you know why we put you in there first? It's so we don't see your blood soil the ground when we shoot you.
Last chance. Where's Bin Laden?
Listen, you have the wrong man. No, 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 please, no! No, no, please, I can't breathe! I can't breathe in here! Please! Open up!
Like it? Built it myself. Took me about 2 weeks.
You do know that mock executions are strictly prohibited by the Convention Against Torture.
This was specifically approved by the White House. It's a bit over your pay grade, soldier.
White House?
The White House, and then relayed by CIA headquarters.
Now! My legs are... What? Get up, motherfucker!
خويا راح نقوم بالصلاة بس لازم تقوم بتصيرة.
No talking, Delta Charlie.
Get off the blanket, motherfucker. You're not authorized to use it now. You hear me? IRF, Delta, Charlie 2.
Detainee on deck.
Enter.
My name is Jim. I'm your lead interrogator.
I see a group of mujahideen. What does that have to do with me?
This is bin Laden. This is you.
This is absurd. I don't know if this is bin Laden, but this is definitely not me. How could you identify me that far away from the camera?
Our experts use facial recognition technology.
Maybe you should change your experts or your technology, because this is definitely not me.
I'm Bob Levin. I'm your lawyer.
How did they publish such lies? I'm not part of Al-Qaeda. And I was not captured in Pakistan. I was kidnapped out of my home in Afghanistan. That's why they took the picture in Bagram. And this one is not me.
Yes, I know. Your wife told me. It's all part of a publicity campaign. They need results, and the media will publish anything the government gives them.
You see, in a few weeks, we'll have more than 500 terrorists detained here, and we won't have enough time to coddle them. So I've been working directly with Secretary Rumsfeld on what is called the First Special Interrogation Plan, which specifies 17 techniques that must now be used on these terrorists. To be crystal clear, I am in favor of using extreme torture methods with the terrorists who refuse to cooperate. Do I have your support on this?
Well, General, you are the commanding officer here. It's not up to me to make decisions.
I'm not asking for you to respect my rank, but to embrace and implement these new methods.
Yes, of course, but as far as extreme torture goes, since it is forbidden by every convention that this country has ever...
I don't give a fuck about conventions or international laws. I do give a fuck about these terrorists and the intel they'll provide.
But if we use torture, any confessions that we may get will not hold up in court.
Who's talking about courts?
Well, one day or another, they'll all end up in court. They can't be held forever.
Yes, they can now. That's the whole point.
The best assistance you can provide is to convince your client to confess his involvement with Al-Qaeda.
So you think he's lying? You truly believe he's a terrorist linked to Al-Qaeda?
Not my job to decide if he's a terrorist or not. I represent the government that captured him because he's a terrorist.
Even as I'm sure you know, he was turned in by his neighbor for the bounty.
That is a convenient story. How would this neighbor even know about the bounty?
Well, we dropped millions of leaflets all over Afghanistan describing it.
Well, that's a nice story, too. Ever seen one of these leaflets?
I did. In fact, I have one in my room. I can show it to you if you want. Donald Rumsfeld himself, he confirmed it on national television. He said, and I quote, "Leaflets were dropped in Afghanistan like snowflakes in December in Chicago." Oh. Tell me what they did to you.
They came. Forced my head into the toilet. And flushed it over and over. I was beaten for hours. I threw my body against the wall so many times. The temperature kept getting just changed, very hot and very cold. And through the loudspeaker, this is very loud, very loud noise. Explosion that hurt my ears. Dogs barking and babies crying for hours in the speakers. And then they put me in a box. So dark. Couldn't move my body. Couldn't sit, stand, couldn't breathe. I started to panic. I started saying things that this you monster.
Gentlemen, we have now heard all arguments regarding the enemy combatant status of the detainee. I will now ask the defender and the prosecutor for a short summation so we may reach a decision.
The scenes you have just witnessed, as thrilling as they are dramatizations of actual events. Snippets taken from the soon-to-be-released full feature film, Am Gitmo. Now we will have Jon Krampner, who is a longtime member of ICUJP and has been protesting for 11 years in front of the downtown Los Angeles Federal Building to close Guantanamo now. Jon Krampner will moderate the panels that will be addressing what you've just witnessed.
Great. Thank you very much, Sharon.
All right, let me get right into an introduction of the panelists. First, let me reintroduce Felipe Diaz. He is the writer and director of I Am Gitmo. His 40-year career as a film producer and director includes such standout films as The End of Poverty and The Empire in Africa. In France, he was awarded the 1986 Louis Deluc Award for Bad Blood, which was also nominated for 3 César Awards, the French equivalent of the Oscar. The Burbank-based Cinema Libre Studio, which he founded, is a leader in the production and distribution of independent narratives and social issue documentary films. Michael Rapkin, along with his son, is a senior partner in the Venice law firm of Rapkin and Associates. He has been a real estate lawyer for 44 years and beginning in 2005, a member of the Guantanamo Bar. He had 2 clients in Guantanamo, both of whom were transferred out after undergoing torture and indefinite detention. Charges were never filed against either of them by the U.S. government. Michael also serves as an advocate for the homeless and is a civil rights lawyer. John Kiriakou has the distinction of being the only employee of the CIA prosecuted for torture, not for engaging in it, but for discussing it with the media. From 1990 until 2004, he worked for the CIA as an analyst, counterterrorism operations officer, and executive assistant to the CIA's Associate Deputy Director for Operations. In a 2007 interview with ABC television, he became the first U.S. government official to admit it had waterboarded al-Qaeda prisoners, which he properly described as torture. In retaliation, he was charged with revealing the identity of a CIA agent and wound up serving 2 years in a federal corrections institute, despite a letter from numerous CIA officials asking that his sentence be commuted. As for myself, as Sharon said, I organized the closed Guantanamo protest rally for the group Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace in front of the downtown Los Angeles Federal Building. We've been doing that for the last 11 years, including earlier today. Felipe, I would like to start with you. Why did you decide to make this film?
Well, it started a long time ago. I have to say I came across probably the first news that came out saying that not only people were kidnapped from their home, etc., but about the CIA black sites and the Guantanamo prison. It was the first news that happened where we started to hear about torture in Guantanamo, and mainly the fact that these people who were captured, kidnapped, and imprisoned did not have the right to defend themselves. At the time, it was Michael will be able to talk much better than me about that. They did not have the right of habeas corpus, and therefore they were left by themselves. And the government decided, as you heard in the movie, that they could be held indefinitely without any trial or anything like that. And I thought immediately that, oh my God, that can't happen in America. That is probably not true. It's probably what we would say not fake news, right? And it was probably the time also where Mohamedou Ould Slahi's book was published called Guantanamo Diary. And of course, as you know, we have the great pleasure and honor to have him today on the panel after the documentary talking about him. And it was probably, I read the censored version when it was published. I read the uncensored version after that. And I started to read everything pretty much because it was so unbelievable to me that I started to read pretty much every legal transcript because there was still some trial and all that. We'll come back into that. I started to read all the transcript and all the book which were published because after Mohamedou's book. There was other ones who were published as well. From, of course, all the detainees who were released wrote a book or did press conference, articles, whatever, but also journalists, translators, lawyers. A lot of people wrote book, or articles or so on and so forth. And for me, it was so absolutely unconscionable that that could happen under the watch of America. And again, that these people would be tortured without having any right whatsoever. It always reminded me, and I'll stop here, it always reminded me, and I put that in one of my other movies, of a great Henry Kissinger quote. I'm not a fan of Henry Kissinger, but this quote is wonderful. He says, international law doesn't apply to the great powers of the world, which means that United States can sign all the convention and all the laws and pass all the laws. It looks great on paper about against torture and this and that. When they decide that it doesn't apply anymore, it does not. And I thought that was so insane that I decided to make a movie about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Felipe. Michael, a question for you. Former Vice President Dick Cheney, who, if you follow the news, he's currently undergoing something of a rehabilitation tour, appallingly enough. Dick Cheney called the prisoners at Guantanamo the worst of the worst. You had two clients in Guantanamo. Who were they? What did they do? And what did the U.S. government do to them?
First of all, Dick Cheney was proven wrong when he made the statement that prisoners at Guantanamo were the worst of the worst. The first 20 that arrived at Guantanamo, which included one of my clients, Mohamedou Ould Slahi, were called the worst of the worst, and yet none of them ever were charged or accused of knowing in advance of the Al-Qaeda plot. Never charged of anything at all. Most of the hundreds that were brought to Guantanamo were never captured on the battlefield. The U.S. forces captured no more than 5% of the prisoners. 8% only were Al-Qaeda soldiers. Most of them, as you saw in this movie, which provided horrendous scenes of the torture, were victims of Donald Rumsfeld causing flyers to be dropped from airplanes. And the leaflets read, "Get wealth and power beyond your dreams," or this isn't enough money to make your family, your tribe for the rest of your life. So he was giving out $5,000 to $25,000 to these poor Afghanis. And so what happened was the Afghanis grabbed tribal enemies that were not from their local community and sold them for bounty to the United States. In short, as one general said, a lot of these detainees were wrong place at the wrong time. And finally, Dick Cheney was a liar. And I don't say that. This came from Lawrence Wilkerson, who was the former Secretary of State, Colin Powell's chief of staff. And he stated, and I believe this was under oath, under penalty of perjury, that the Bush administration knew it had innocent prisoners, lied about it, and still tortured. My clients, the first one I had was Yosef al-Rabayesh, who at age 20 left his family in Saudi Arabia to locate and bring home his brother, who was fighting before 9/11 for the Taliban against the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan. It's important for the listeners to know that in Afghanistan before 9/11, they had a civil war. The Taliban, who the United States once supported, and the Northern Alliance. And so Yosef went to Afghanistan, found his brother, and then he and his brother were involved in a massacre by the Northern Alliance with no weapons, and they were handcuffed. Yosef's brother was shot and killed, as were others. Yosef was shot in the back while handcuffed, went to the Northern Alliance jail, and ultimately was taken to Guantanamo Bay 9 days after the prison opened in January 2022. I'm sorry to say that a lot of the torture that you did see in this movie was accurate. But let me describe some of the torture that Joseph himself went to. His physical torture included the frequent practice of several known as the Rapid Intervention Forces, and we saw them briefly in the movie. These brave men, these soldiers wearing full armor with metal gloves, a baton, and a helmet would enter Joseph's prison cell before breakfast, lunchtime, and dinner, throw him against the wall, and beat him up with fists and their boots. They frequently shackled tightly and painfully Joseph. They hit him in the genitals, they hit him in the head. Joseph suffered with back problems. He had 3 broken bones, prostate and hemorrhoid problems. And once, and I'll never forget him telling me this, he was kneeling, he was praying, and one of the soldiers kicked him in the eye and blood came out of his eye. That affected me a lot. But the physical torture that he had was not the main source or the only source of torture. In Guantanamo, they had more psychological than physical torture. What do I mean by that? They isolated people for up to 1 year. They had temperature manipulation. They told family members, they told Joseph and others that they had family members that were captured by the US and that the family would be raped if the detainees did not reveal secrets. And then there was also the frequent flyer program, the sleep deprivation program mentioned in the movie, and I'll get into it when I speak about my next client, Mohamedou Ould Slahi. Before I get to Mohammed, let me just say that Joseph, who I said arrived January 2022, was released from Guantanamo in December 2006. He was then flown to a rehabilitation facility in Saudi Arabia, stayed there for a year, and ultimately was released from that program and freed in December 2007. Mohammed Ghanem, in the 90s, he was accused of participating in jihad activities in Bosnia, and as a Yemeni, he participated in a Yemeni civil war in the 90s, pre-9/11. He admitted that he volunteered for the Taliban before 9/11. He had a rifle. He kept it on top of a mountain. That was his job, to protect a mountain. And after 9/11, when the Americans began bombing and looking for Osama bin Laden, he and many others hightailed it out of Afghanistan and went to the closest border of Afghanistan. When he was en route to Pakistan, he was picked up. He was not picked up on the battlefield. He was not picked up with a weapon, but he was named as one of the Dirty 30, who was thought to be one of Osama bin Laden's personal bodyguards, according to 1 or 2 other tortured detainees who would say anything they can so that they would have their own torture alleviated. Think about the absurdity of this for just a moment. This guy is Taliban soldier with a rifle one day with the Taliban, who also did not know the name Osama bin Laden. A month, 6 weeks after 9/11, he's picked up and he's accused of being one of Osama bin Laden's personal bodyguards. Now imagine bin Laden was the most hunted man in the world, and he's going to entrust his life to some guy that he had just met who was trained to use a rifle. That's what we came with. That's what he came with. Became a personal bodyguard, and for that, he was treated very poorly. He entered Guantanamo the first day that it opened up for business, January 11, 2022, exactly 20 years to the day. Mohammed was subjected to prolonged sleep deprivation in Guantanamo, what was euphemistically termed the frequent flyer program. Every 2 hours, he would get moved from cell to cell, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes cell to cell, sometimes block to block. This was over a period of 8 months.
Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, John, I wanted to ask you, as a CIA operations agent, you were given the opportunity to employ what the Bush-Cheney administration euphemistically called enhanced interrogation techniques, but which most people call torture. You wanted to avenge America for al-Qaeda's crimes of September 11th. Why didn't you choose to engage in torture?
You know, on my first day at the CIA, along with 300 other people, I put my right hand up in the air and I swore to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I regret very much that, in retrospect, I was the only person in that room of 300 that actually meant it. I'm a firm believer in the rule of law. At the CIA, we're trained to believe that we're the good guys. And the good guys have to lead by example. And the example is the rule of law and respect for international treaties and agreements, including treaties outlawing torture and ensuring human rights. I had a nickname at the CIA, the human rights guy. That was not a compliment. And in fact, even after leading the raid that captured Abu Zubaydah, who we believed at the time was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda, I was denied promotion because I refused to be trained in the torture techniques. When I got home from Pakistan in May of 2002, I was approached by a senior officer in the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, and very casually, he asked me if I wanted to be trained, his words, trained in the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. I had never heard that term before. And I asked him what it meant. And he said, very excitedly, "We're going to start getting rough with these guys." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And he described these techniques. And I said, "That sounds like a torture program." And he said, "It's not torture. The Justice Department approved it and the president signed it. We're doing it." And I said, I don't think I care if the president signed it. Torture's torture. Like, have you guys never read the Geneva Convention? Seriously? Have you never read the United Nations Convention Against Torture? I mean, this is like basic grad school reading. And so, again, I'm embarrassed to say that of the 14 people who were asked to go through this training, I was the only one who said no. I believed then that it was wrong, it was illegal, and by 2007, I had waited for 5.5 years for somebody to come out and say something, and nobody did. And so I decided that the American people own this information. They have a right to know what their government is doing in their name. It is illegal to classify a criminal act, and I believe that torture was a criminal act, and so I would go public, and that's what I did.
For having done so, John. John, let me ask you a follow-up question. In your book, The Reluctant Spy, you write, quote, "American troops and their allies were capturing shepherds and mechanics and opium farmers. What to do? Send them to Guantanamo," end quote. There they were tortured, as they were at CIA black sites and sites operated by the governments of U.S. allies. You've opposed criminal prosecution for CIA employees who engaged in torture on the grounds they were acting within guidelines and legal rationales emanating from the top of the Bush-Cheney administration. What are your thoughts as to whether those higher-ups should be subject to criminal prosecution, either in the U.S. or through universal jurisdiction?
Oh, I believe very firmly that it is those higher ups who should be prosecuted. I oppose the prosecution of the working level people, just because many of them did what they did only because they were promised that what they were doing was legal. This was from the Justice Department. But the likes of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and John Yoo and Jay Bybee and George Tenet, and I can list 24 more. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew it was illegal. They didn't care. And they're the ones that should pay a price. Now, instead, you know this as well as I do, they went on to $5 and $6 million book deals and $5 million a year careers in venture capital and things like that. But they're the ones that should be in the dock at The Hague. The only reason that they're not is we're the United States. If they had been the leaders of any other country, they might be in prisons around the world for the rest of their lives. And I wanted to make one point, too, about the film. I know that a lot of the viewers were shaken by the violence that was involved in this torture program. I would posit that it was worse if the prisoners were in CIA hands, because while all those things that we saw in the film were actually happening in the secret CIA prisons, the prisoners were naked at the time as a way to further humiliate them. And what we saw, what Philippe showed us in the film, was really just a small taste of what was going on in those god-awful facilities.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Felipe, the Mauritanian, the story of Guantanamo prisoner Mohamedou Ould Slahi, has been praised for being the rare Hollywood film that takes up the issue of U.S. torture at Guantanamo. But you've criticized it. Why?
Well, so torture is a complex problem, and to just answer a little bit what John said, when I started to edit this 25 minutes program, I tried to figure out how much torture can I put in the movie, can I impose on the viewers who are not necessarily aware of anything. And when it's a 2 hours plus movie, you have stories which develop and things which happen. So it's why, John, to answer your point, yes, I cut the torture to pretty much what I consider the minimum, to not have the people turn off their computer right away. So to answer your question, the other John, is that I was to tell you the truth, I wanted to buy the books of Mohamedou, when it was published, Guantanamo Diary, to make a movie about it, and they bought it before me, and which was great. And when I heard it, they were making this movie, I said, wonderful. The book is so wonderful for one major reason, is that it sees all this issue through his eyes, nobody else. He explained it's really a diary, as the name of the title of the book says. It's a diary of what happened to him day per day per day per day. And that was mind-blowing and eye-opening like nothing else. And when I went to see the Mauritanian, and I was so excited, I said, oh my God, that will see a great movie. I was falling down on my chair little by little to the ground, because for several reasons. Number one, I know that when America makes a mistake and Hollywood wants to make a movie about it, they are fine to make a movie and say we made a mistake, as long as there is one American hero to save the day. It's always, yes, we made a mistake, but look, there is John Blow who will just save the day and fix it all, and all is good now. Okay, that's Hollywood way to make movies. Now they didn't need 1 hero, they needed 4. There is the lawyer, which is a great woman and really helped Mohamedou, of course, to get out of jail, no question. There's the assistant of the lawyer who is against torture and will resign and come back and whatever. There is the military officer assigned to the case who is also against torture and who will resign. And there is this great judge who will set him free. And so it's not anymore a movie seen through the eyes of the inmate. It's a movie seen through the eyes of these 4 American heroes, which is a bit sad. But worse for me is that they made Guantanamo seem almost fun. in the sense that, the interrogators are very nice. They crack jokes with the inmates, and they are super nice. And he plays soccer in the courtyard with another. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very important to make a movie like that on this subject. They had a big budget. They had major stars. They are all great actors, a great director, and all this and all that. When I criticize it, it's not so much as a movie, but as the elements in the movie. Because so not only the Guantanamo seems okay, there is of course a minute and a half of torture, of montage of torture in the film, which is supposed to make us feel terrible about this guy, and it does, of course. But it's a minute and a half on a 2-hour movie, so of course it's not very important. And at the end of the day, the moral of the movie is he wrote his book, he became rich and famous, he's happy in his country, so all is good now. And I think that's the worst thing for the cause. You look at this movie, you can feel really sad about this guy. He's like, okay, he had maybe a little bit of torture somehow, somewhere, etc. But Guantanamo was not so bad, and he's now rich and famous. So what's wrong about that? No, there is one general, I forgot his name, one of the, not General Miller, another guy who was running Guantanamo, another program in the military, who was saying, what are they complaining about? Guantanamo is great. We educate them and we feed them. So what's wrong with that? And and it's like, oh my God, of course, if we continue to propagate these kind of thoughts, we'll never close the prison, that's for sure. That's why I had a problem with Michael.
Great, thank you. A Hollywood movie that gives it the subject the Hollywood treatment. Who could have predicted? Michael, your traditional field of expertise isn't criminal law or human rights law. It's real estate. When the Center for Constitutional Rights put out a nationwide call in 2005 for pro bono lawyers, why did you choose to get involved?
I got involved because after having decades of having a lot of pride in my real estate practice, some business law, from the first day I became a lawyer, I thought that the heroes in the legal community are the public defenders, are the attorneys like with the ACLU and public interest law firms that are protecting us. And so this gave me an opportunity to do good. I want to do good. And so I got involved with it. And it additionally gave me an opportunity, imagine this, for some real estate lawyer. I got to sue George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld. The headline, the caption of our case was Yosef Arabayesh versus George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. And so in my own little way, I was able to fight them, and they deserve to be fought against. I learned a lot about torture. And that's what got me to Guantanamo.
Great. Michael, tell us a little about the Guantanamo Bar. How many lawyers have been members? What areas of law do they come from? And do you guys have reunions?
I don't know how many lawyers are members of the Guantanamo Bay Bar Association. It's very informal. I can tell you that there's well over 100 lawyers. Most of the lawyers over the years that I've met and conversed with for many years, beginning in 2005, most of them are from these big law firms located in New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. And they were high-paid, salaried lawyers, and they did phenomenal work. Some of the most brilliant minds I ever saw came from these law firms. And then on the other hand, you had a few small law firms like Michael Rapkin and his son Scott Rapkin from Los Angeles, California, that would take $7,000 out of their pocket every time we had to make a trip to Guantanamo, because it was $1,500 per day for our Arabic translator. There's no reunions. There's a link where lawyers still go back and forth about pending cases. And with 39 detainees, there's not as much action as there used to be.
I see. Well, thank you for standing up for the honor of the West Coast, Michael. John, Americans like to think of ourselves as exceptional. You've kind of touched on this a little earlier, but is there anything exceptional about American torture, or is it just as morally debased and illegal as any other kind?
Are you asking me?
Yes, John.
Yeah, I think there is something different about American torture. Uh, we're bad at it. One of the things that most of these clowns that I worked with didn't understand was that in addition to being illegal and immoral and unethical, it just simply doesn't work. You know, you're torturing a man, and you think you're getting information from him, actionable information, actionable intelligence, and you're not. He's telling you anything that he thinks you want to hear just to get you to stop torturing him. And so, these interrogators had the ticking time bomb scenario in their minds where there's an attack that's impending, and they're going to get that nugget through torture that's going to save American lives and get them promoted and get them a medal and make them famous in the halls at Langley. But what ends up happening is the prisoner gives you so much information just to get you to stop torturing him that 90% of it is garbage, or 100% of it is garbage. And then you have to assign a team of analysts to pour through this information for the next 6 months to figure out what's real and what's not real. In the meantime, the bomb's gone off and the operation has taken place and 20 people are dead. So this was just, it pains me, frankly, to compliment the FBI. As a former CIA officer, I hate the FBI. But they're really good at interrogations. And the reason they're good at it is because they've been doing it since Nuremberg. And the reason that they're successful is because they establish a rapport with their prisoner, not by beating him and threatening to rape his wife and to kill his children and put a drill next to his head or put him in a coffin for 2 weeks or dump cockroaches on top of him. They do it by offering him a cigarette, an orange, a bowl of dates, permission to write a letter to his wife. They establish this relationship. They make the prisoner comfortable to the point where they can have an intelligent conversation based on a degree of trust, and they collect actionable intelligence that way that has disrupted attacks and has saved American lives.
Great,
But the
thank you,
CIA,
John.
they thought they were smarter than everybody else.
Great, thank you, John. Felipe, when do you hope to finish I Am Gitmo? How will it be distributed? And given that it's such strong stuff, how difficult do you think it will be to get people to go see it?
Well, just also to add one little thing that John said very eloquently, but which is interesting, is about the fact that even the FBI wrote reports condemning the use of torture by the CIA, which is kind of unheard of between agencies in a way. And I think that's a very important point because it's correct that the FBI is not, apart from some exception, notable exception, is not engaged in torture, which is interesting. Anyway, to answer your question, I would say yes, it will be very hard no matter what. It was very hard to make the film. I knew that I would not get any Hollywood money to make a movie because I don't know if you noticed that in the movie, but everything is seen through the eyes of the main character, which is this Egyptian. Is in the movie is Egyptian, live in Afghanistan, married with an Afghani woman, have children, da da da. I know nobody would give me money to make a movie seen through his eyes and nobody else, because as you saw briefly, when he's under the hood, the camera is under the hood. When he's in the coffin, the camera is in the coffin, etc., etc. And so I did the movie by borrowing money or getting my friends and partner to contribute to the movie. That was the only way I could do it. Nobody would give me money. And it will be probably the same thing to distribute it. So we are a distributor. And as you said at the beginning, Cinema Libre is specialized in distributing documentary and feature film related to social issues. So the idea is that we should be fully finished with the movie in the next few weeks. We are in the mixing process and color correction and all these kind of things, and we will submit it to the major festival, of course, in the U.S. and around the world, and hope that one will give it the nice premiere that the subject deserves. I don't know if the movie deserves it, but at least the subject deserves it. And from there, we'll see if there is any interest by bigger guys than us to distribute it. If there is not, then we'll distribute it. That's what we do.
Great, thank you. One last question for everyone. Later in the program, Sharon will be providing information about how people can write to President Biden about closing Guantanamo. Other than writing to President Biden, their House representative, and their senators, what else can people do to help close Guantanamo? Anyone can take this.
Maybe Sharon and Dick could answer that.
That's a tough one.
I've thought about this very question considerably in anticipation of this discussion. And to me, the bottom line is there's three entities that can take care of it. One is President Biden. Number two is the Department of Defense. And number three is the goddamn Congress, who has passed the NDAA, which is called the National Defense Authorization Act, which prevents, right now, by legislation, nobody on Guantanamo soil can enter the United States for a federal court trial, to enter a federal prison, or even to get medical help. So until that's taken care of, we can't end the military commissions, which need to be shut down yesterday. They're terrible. They're disgusting. And that can be done by Biden and the Department of Defense. They can shut that down and they can close Guantanamo, but they need the help of Congress. So I really didn't help you very much, because those are the three entities: the Executive, Department of Defense, and the recalcitrant Congress to do what's right. And that's the bottom line to it.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
One little thing just to that is that, and it's why we made this movie. It's why we acquired the documentaries that you will see later about Mohamedou Ould Slahi going to confront his torturer and all that after that he was released. I personally believe that nothing will happen unless there is a major push by the people for Biden to close the prison. It will never happen. Like, none of the this kind of major decision will happen unless there is a big push. And it's why we did this movie, and it's why all of you are involved in that, to try to convince people that it's time to act.
Great. I want to thank all of the panelists very much for the noble work they've done and for participating in this. And I guess at this point we will move to the next aspect of the program.
We have some questions from our audience. So we'd like to thank the panelists for their very engaging discussion and informative discussion, but some audience members have some very specific questions, and I'm going to begin with one that says, did we get any intelligence out of the torture, anything valuable?
I think I can answer the second one.
Go ahead.
No, we didn't gain anything valuable. The valuable intelligence that we gained was gathered by the FBI, and it was gathered from Abu Zubaydah, primarily from Abu Zubaydah and from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But it was gathered before and after the CIA took over and began torturing. What we got from Abu Zubaydah, for example, that was important was twofold. One, we really had no understanding of Al Qaeda's wiring diagram. We just didn't know how it was organized, how it was set up. Three things, actually. Number one, the wiring diagram. Number two, Abu Zubaydah was a logistics expert. If you wanted to get into Afghanistan, he could get you in. If you were tired of the fight, he could get you out, give you some money, a false passport. He set up the 2 training camps in southern Afghanistan. He opened the safe house in Peshawar, Pakistan, called the House of Martyrs. He was very important. And he explained to us how he was able to do that and to whom he would go in the event that Al Qaeda wanted to arrange an action against us. And third, he's the one who told us that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was using the nom de guerre Mukhtar. We knew that there was a bad guy out there named Mukhtar. We didn't have any idea what his real name was. We didn't know where he was. It was Abu Zubaydah that told us that it was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Now, he told us all of these things before the CIA began to torture him. He told Ali Soufan, an FBI interrogator. The CIA was jealous of Ali Soufan's success and took over the interrogations immediately. And when I say immediately, I mean within 2 hours, began torturing him, and he completely clammed up. That happened twice. So no actionable intelligence was gathered from torture. It was all gathered by the FBI through traditional interrogation techniques, which means interviewing.
So here's another question.
Let me just add to that.
Go ahead.
May I add to
Yeah.
very quickly? In 2014, the Senate Intelligence Committee had a study, and it concluded that the torture program was not effective and that the CIA lied and exaggerated about its effectiveness. So this is coming from these US senators, not from some CIA whistleblower or progressive lawyer activist.
So here's a question that encapsulates several questions from our listeners. Our government undertook over 20 years extensive efforts to keep secret what it was doing. But by this time, and really for a long time, we've seen pictures of torture from Abu Ghraib. We know about the rendition sites, despite the efforts to keep them quiet. And 4 presidents have not been able to deal with Guantanamo. It is now at this point a worldwide humiliation for America in the eyes of, I would say, a great many people. Why? What does our government, does our military, does the CIA have to gain by keeping Guantanamo going? That's for anybody.
Well, for one thing, the government officials, going back to George W. Bush and the other 2 torturers that were his buddies, do not want to admit that they're wrong. And these documents go to show the more the torture and more of what was said by the tortured victims. And that's why so much of what the lawyers have received over the years to defend our clients have been redacted. So much has been redacted. Stuff that is deemed classified should not have been classified per different judges. So we have a problem with the government not wanting to admit fault.
Early on in this presentation, it was mentioned that Donald Rumsfeld sent out leaflets, I guess from aircraft, leaflets offering payment for anyone that was involved in 9/11. And we have a question here that says, how much do you believe cruelty was part of the torture program? Because to my mind, it seems to me that the brown people who were taken into Guantanamo were fungible. If you're just gonna, it didn't really matter. If you're gonna offer payment, you know that you're probably gonna get a lot of people who didn't do anything. So for those of you who have some insight in this, how much do you think just plain pure cruelty, sadistic cruelty, played a role in this?
Yeah, don't underestimate the desire for revenge. And I mean, among people at the White House, the Defense Department, the CIA, this was the 9/11 was the greatest intelligence failure in American history, and really not even just an intelligence failure. It was an American failure, right? The State Department gave the hijackers visas. The FBI and the CIA couldn't cooperate with one another. We failed at every single level. Even security at the airports failed. And so, because of their screw up, this epically historical screw up, 3,000 Americans lost their lives in one day. And so there was this overwhelming desire for revenge. Well, they killed our innocent people, we're going to kill theirs now. And so I don't think anybody cared who was innocent and who was guilty. They just wanted to beat on anybody they could capture.
I would add something to that because I researched that a lot. I read probably every single book published on the questions and of Guantanamo, of course, the CIA black site in Guantanamo's, and read all the court transcript I could find, etc., etc. And I really wondered, how do I present the characters? And I did a lot of research on the cruelty aspect, and I came up with something which I think is the reality, because John is right, but he's describing the top of the ladder. For the people at the bottom, for me, everything that I read, they were totally brainwashed by the government. It was, they are the worst of the worst. Saddam Hussein and Bin Laden are preparing 100 more 9/11s. Unless you stop it, and we are giving you the people who are preparing this 9/11, unless you stop it, there will be tens of thousands of people who will die in America and everywhere else. What do you want them to do? And on top of that, they were given, I'm not excusing anything, of course, when I say that. I made an entire movie to not excuse them. But when you hear these kind of things and you are giving a list of detailed program, it's why I made the one who plays General Miller in the film going through the list of this program. It was a very specific list. It was not, oh, you can be rough on them the way you want. No, it was, here is the list that Donald Rumsfeld and all these guys that you mentioned came up with, including General Miller, who ran Guantanamo and was after, by the way, sent to Abu Ghraib. And just for the little story, he had zero experience in intelligence gathering, but doesn't matter. So for me, the story of cruelty is that these guys, yes, there was certainly a part of cruelty on the lower level, but they were dealing with the worst of the worst, who were ready to kill any American they could find. That was the brainwashing, which was, I think, very, very important at the time.
So we now have 39 remaining of the close to 800 that have gone to Guantanamo. We are spending in excess of $500 million a year to keep Guantanamo running. How much are we spending on a remedy to the harms that we've done to people who have done nothing wrong?
That would be $0. Because we have a national policy that we don't apologize to anyone for anything ever. We could ask Maher Arar, for example, about the torture that he endured and how he didn't even get so much as an apology. He was a completely innocent man. Or Mohamedou Ould Slahi, that we're going to speak with in the next few minutes, what that poor guy went through. Or Khaled al-Masri, an utterly innocent Egyptian German who we snatched off of a bus in Serbia and sent to Egypt to undergo torture. We never even so much as apologize, let alone to try to rectify it through payment of some sort of damages.
And keep in mind that in Canada and in the UK, monetary reparations were made to some of their citizens who spent time in Guantanamo, but not here in the United States. Nope.
So I had a question, perhaps particularly for John Kiriyaku. You spent a long time in the CIA, and you said at one time you were part of a 14-person training session, and you were the one person who refused, I think, to be trained in torture. But I wonder, did your fellow CIA analysts and agents, did they welcome these assignments? Were they looking to
Ah,
torture, or were they drawn in and had no choice and followed reluctantly?
that's a great question. Uh, no, there were huge splits inside the CIA. There was an enormous minority that didn't want any part of this, and that's why I remained silent for so long, because there were people that were actually at the secret site witnessing the torture who were so appalled that they were resigning from the CIA, they were curtailing their assignments and returning to headquarters. We would get cables that people who were in the room during the torture were vomiting from stress and disgust, saying, "I never signed up for this. This is against the law." Um, but nobody ever said anything. Nobody ever went public. They were afraid to lose their jobs. They were afraid to be sort of cut out, cast out of whatever clique they happened to be in. Uh, but this was certainly not a universally popular program, not at all.
Okay, I have a question. I want to put two questions together because one I think can be answered pretty quickly. The first one is, were there any women detained at Guantanamo? And then the second question is, the people, the 39 that are remaining there, why are they still there? And I'll give that question to anybody who wants to answer it.
John, you already shook your head no to the woman
Yeah,
question. Why
no
don't you
women.
follow?
No women. There was one high value target woman, Afia Siddiqui, who was captured and first sent to Afghanistan. And then from there, she was sent to Boston and she was prosecuted in Boston. Of the 39 people who are at Guantanamo now, I think it's 15 who have already, correct me if I'm wrong, 15 that have been designated for release. It's just a question of finding a country willing to take them. But here we are. Some of them were designated for release a decade ago, and they're still there. And our side says, "Oh, we can't find anybody to take them." Have we asked anybody? Uh, we don't know.
Yeah, we one reason we haven't asked anybody is that during the Donald Trump scandalous years, he not only didn't transfer anybody out on his own, but he closed what is called the Office of Special Envoy for Guantanamo, which was the small office that dealt with other countries, either to repatriate them to their home country or to transfer them to another country. So that's it. And it's about 15 have been already cleared for transfer by the Departments of Defense, Justice, Homeland Security, and others. And they're just sitting there rotting in jail. Others, several of them have been deemed to be, quote unquote, too dangerous to release. In other words, we're not going to try them. We're not going to give them habeas corpus. We're not going to give them a day in court. They're not going to have any evidence. They're never going to have a chance at this point in time to defend themselves and prove the government made a mistake. But rather, because they might be too dangerous, they're going to sit and rot in jail in the United States of America. And lastly, you have the military commissions. There's about 10 of them, which would include Sheikh Mohammed. So there's a few bad guys there out of the 39. There's only just a few bad guys out of 780. And the military commissions is going nowhere. Sheikh Mohammed has been there for 9 years. They're not even close to starting a trial yet. It's going nowhere, and it never will go anywhere. So they need to get rid of the military commissions, bring them to a federal court. My last words, Osama bin Laden's son-in-law was arrested tried, convicted, and sentenced in a United States court in Manhattan, New York, in 14 months. 14 months because he was in a federal court, and we did justice, and he had a fair trial. Unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. Someone was asking why these people specifically, and I think that last statement that you just made makes it very clear. I just have a follow-on question. For those detainees who were supposedly searching for where to place them, are there any distinctions in their treatment? Are they still caged? I mean, it's already been shown that they're guilty of nothing. How are they
Well,
treated?
well, today they're more in a communal setting. One of the worst prison sites, it was Camp 7, is so dilapidated that they had to move people out of there because it was no longer safe. So the bottom line is they don't do physical torture in Guantanamo, per my understanding today. They live more in a communal living situation, and they're not treated as well as the iguanas who are protected under the Endangered Species Act. That's the bottom line.
So we have several questions from speakers about what we as individuals can do. Jon Lackner wonders if there's something we could do at Long Beach or the LA port, which ships 40%, according to him, of the goods that are used at Guantanamo Bay. Others have talked about letter writing campaigns or appealing to senators. Do any of you feel, and Jon Krampner has been, for 11 years, has been putting on a demonstration. Maybe he might want to talk about that as well. I mean, do you think this would have any effect at all? And what can individuals do?
Jon Krampner.
The one thing that I think would be good is if closed Guantanamo demonstrations would now they're held in Washington, D.C., possibly New York, maybe Seattle, Los Angeles. It would be nice if they would start springing up in Texas, in Mississippi, and anywhere, anything that would help to create more of a national sense of movement that however right you think America is, or how strong or how wonderful, that if we're going to live up to our founding compact, then this is unacceptable and it needs to be closed down.
Thank you, Jon. Well, that was our last question before we move on to the next part of the program. But before we move on, is there anyone that wants to express any closing thoughts?
I have a tiny one that I would want the audience to understand is that we talk about torture, and of course it's horrible, etc. But I'm not sure that people know what the extent of torture. Like, for example, people died under torture, and not just one, many. And even the CIA had to acknowledge that they said, "Oh, yes, we lost a few," as they say, very nicely. So, we put in the movie the example of Dilawar, who is a very well-known example, who was beaten for fun, pretty much, by the people in Afghanistan, in the prison where he was. But there was many examples like that. So I think it's important for people to realize it's not just torture like beating and so on. It goes much farther than that, and yes, people died from it.
May I add one short statement? I Am Gitmo is a movie that needs to be shown, and I don't know how we can get universal attention to it. That's for him and the producers. But there's a quote by Maya Angelou, and I'd like to read it. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. We need to let people know what I've seen with Mr. Al Rabayesh, and I was in tears telling him This is not what we do in the United States. We don't torture and hold people forever. We need to get the word out.
Thank you, John.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being back with us or still with us. So we have a little bit of a very unique next movie, which I discovered, as you know, when we were shooting, when you heard, if you were here on the first part, when we were shooting I Am Gitmo, I heard about this movie, which I thought was totally fascinating, which is the story of Mohamedou Ould Slahi, who wrote Guantanamo Diary, which inspired me and a lot of other people to do something about Guantanamo. He wrote this book. It was first of all censored, then published censored. After it was republished and censored, and it opened to this. It was adapted as a movie called The Mauritanian, with Jodie Foster and Benedict Cumberbatch and many other great actors. But I heard about this documentary that John Goetz did with him, which was the idea that to go find. So Mohamedou spent 14 years in Guantanamo, and he was tortured and beaten and everything else that you can imagine, that he relates very clearly in his book. And he decided, after being released with no charge, that he would go after. He would try to find, let's say, the people who tortured him, the people who physically tortured him, Mr. Hex, who is described in the book in all details possible, and the people who were running the program to torture him, interrogate him, etc. And he has John Goetz, who had write a long article about him, to studied a lot. He's an investigative journalist who studied a lot his case and wrote an article. He asked him if he would help him to do that. And John went all around the place, all around the country in the US, to find these three people, and he made a movie about that. And it's absolutely fascinating because, of course, as you'll see, some were not too happy to be confronted to someone they had tortured, and some others were more interested. And Mohamedou had the wonderful line. He says, "Look, I forgive you. I want to invite you in my house to have tea." And that's what the movie is about. I think it's a very important movie. And I think what is even more important is that we will have John Goetz and Mohamedou after to do a Q&A with us and discuss the film. So I hope you will, I don't want to say enjoy because it's hard to enjoy, but you will be interested by the next movie. Thank you for being here.
I'm on my way to meet someone I think of as a friend. But in reality, we've never even met. Because since I've known him, he's been a prisoner in Guantanamo Bay.
Guantanamo Bay, the notorious American prison. Many of Guantanamo's inmates have been there for 15 years, but today one of them has arrived home, Mohamedou Slahi. Once a student in Germany, now internationally known for his best-selling book about his mistreatment at the facility, Slahi
It was 9 years ago that I started my investigation into Mohamedou's case. It was the first time that someone had told the story from his point of view, his version of the strange and complicated events that led him from his beginnings as the son of a camel herder, via an elite scholarship to a life in Germany, to the cells of Guantanamo Bay. And when he read my article at Guantanamo, his lawyers told me he broke down and cried. But I soon found out that Mohamedou had a reason he wanted to see me. He's not finished with what happened to him at Guantanamo. He has a plan. In his best-selling book that he wrote in Guantanamo, Mohamedou writes on the last page that he invites the men and women who mistreated him to a cup of tea in his home.
We are here, Dick and Sharon of LA Progressive, along with Philippe Diaz of Cinema Libre. And to be honest with you, I believe that we are at this moment waiting for Mohamedou Ould Slahi to enter into this this platform. It is 5 o'clock in the morning where he is. I don't know if he's in Mauritania. And also we're waiting for John Goetz. But while we wait, Felipe, why don't you give us a few minutes of your experience of this film as a person, as a filmmaker, and someone who has been so deeply connected to this issue?
Well, I think that yes, I confirm that John is and Mohamedou are getting ready to come in. They are awake. Mohamedou is making tea to get ready for us and to celebrate with us. So, which is great. But yeah, it was a big shock for me because it's very, very unusual. Us filmmakers specifically who are making fiction, we are used to tell things and tell the story that we want. But having the real people testifying of what happened and what they did and why they did it, it's a totally different story. So it's why I really wanted to have John Goetz, who did the film, to be here and tell us how it happened, and also Mohamedou, of course, because we are all making movies and being activists, trying to help. To here is John to close the prison, but Mohamedou spent 14 years in Guantanamo. So you don't need to hear me anymore. But John, thank you for waking up so early because it's 5 o'clock in the morning where you are. So why don't you tell us, how you learned about Mohamedou's story and how you started to investigate it and what happened and how you got in touch with him.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can hear me, right? Everything's fine in terms of sound. Yeah, great. Um, well, I used to work as a investigative journalist at the German magazine Der Spiegel, and we were interested, of course, and I did a lot of stuff on the war on terror, and we were interested in who were the Germans who were at Guantanamo. And Mohamedou had lived in Germany for 14 years. He went to university, became an engineer, actually at one of Germany's most prestigious companies is where he ended up getting a full-time job. And so when the media and began to report that he was one of the people behind 9/11, that's what kind of first got me interested in his case. And what happened between us is that I first did a longer story for Der Spiegel way back in, I think, 2007, kind of, and it was the first time that kind of his case had been looked at critically. It was the first time that we kind of looked at the evidence and said, does this really add up? Because really up until then there was like a monolithic reporting that went on that he was guilty, that he was behind 9/11 and that kind of thing. So I hope my answer wasn't too long, but that's how I originally got involved. Then of course got to know his legal team, Nancy Hollander, and that's was my initial interest in the case, and then I kind of stayed with it.
So,
how you got reconnected? Sorry, Sharon. How you got reconnected and how you embarked in the movie? And I know that.
Hey, Mohamedou.
Hi, Mohamedou. Very nice. Thank you. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, so
can you come again?
Oh, okay. Yeah, they just asked me how we met, Mohamedou, and I was curious how you would put it.
Okay. It was first. I want to thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you, Philips, for inviting us to this beautiful, you would say evening, we would say early in the morning, and I'm just so happy to be part of this. I heard so much about Cinema Libre. It has very, very good reputation in this part of the world. I can tell you that. So, yeah, it was. I met him first without seeing him through an article he wrote, and the article was very very mixed. because he was only part of the article that was written for Der Spiegel. And in this, at least this part of the world, Der Spiegel is one of those like somewhat progressive, but it's not really that progressive. So I'm just being very open about this. And a lot of the journalists back then, they were sleeping with the CIA and they were just swallowing everything they tell them. And before this article that he helped write, everything was, I just was convicted, completely convicted, you know, and I was just like saying, what's going on? So why they don't ask me? But they don't even bother to ask me, and they don't have access anyway to ask me. But they just don't question anything. But this is the first time that he started questioning what they did. And I was reading the article, like my lawyer brought it to me, and I was shaking. That's the first time I met him, actually. And then it would take many, many years, over, I think, 8 years, you know, for me to meet him when he came to visit me in Mauritania through my lawyer, Nancy Holland. They are friends, and she introduced me to him, and he came to me in Mauritania, just as he showed in the film.
So how did you get to do the film, John?
Wait. Sorry, what did you say?
I said, how did you get to do this film, and how did you two agree on how to proceed? Because I think it's for me, it's a very important piece, as I was saying before, to introduce it. I think it's a very important piece because there's a big difference between us filmmaker doing something specifically like I did when it's fiction, or even if it's based on true events, still fiction, and to have the real people saying what they did, why they did it, etc. So I think it's a very important film, and I wanted you two to talk about how you came along to do that, and how you decided to do it, how you decided to go after these people, etc. Because it's a very unique thing. And of course, after, I would love Mohamedou to tell us how you can forgive what happened and invite these people for tea.
Well, then I think his answer will be more interesting than mine. Let me just say, I mean, kind of the bar of getting something, you know, I work for German public television, and the bar of getting something, you know, kind of on prime time, 90 minutes about Guantanamo and about the war of terror and about what, you know, kind of crimes committed, you know, by the alliance that Germany is certainly a part of. Is pretty high, right? I mean, I think that it's and so we had to come up with something that would be, yeah, would get it on the main channel, and would, you know, would and so when Mohamedou came out, and I saw in kind of the end of his book, he says, you know, I'd like to invite the people who I got to know at Guantanamo to a cup of tea. And I was like, well, that's, you know, maybe we can do a film about the people saying no to him. Because that's kind of what we'd even filmed. Actually, if you remember, Mohamedou, I mean, like, we filmed kind of me calling people, and, you know, and like them, you know, hanging up and all of that. There's all, that was kind of the initial thing. And we didn't really expect anyone to engage. That we, at least, did you actually, Mohamedou?
Absolutely not. Just like Jean said, it looked very like ambitious and risky at the same time, because we really didn't know anything how this is going to develop. And I just expressed to Jean my readiness and my willingness completely, and war crimes. Those people, ironically, are the most protected people in this war. And one of the ironies also, Philippe, is when this movie you just viewed was launched in Germany, I was the only character in this movie. The only character in this movie was banned from coming to Germany to visit my friend John and watch the movie with them. The only person who was banned. And this is like so, to me, it's so like disheartening, to see that the Western world is turning its back completely to human rights, and just like nothing changes.
No. It's exactly right. All of them are free to come to Germany. And the only person who's not free to come to Germany is the person who lived here for how many years? And I forget in the end, 12 or 14 years here, who went to university here, who has like deep ties to this country. To this day, the German government refuses to allow Mohamedou to enter the country.
I'd like to ask a question. Mr. Slahi, hello, my name is Sharon Kyle, and my husband Dick Price and I, we publish the LA Progressive, a progressive digital magazine in Los Angeles. And this whole issue of the 20th anniversary of Guantanamo is terribly demoralizing, especially for Americans with conscience. But I have to tell you that hearing your story gave me hope. And I'd like to know about the arc, the evolution of your healing. Not to say that you're completely healed now, but I can imagine that initially you would not have wanted to talk to Mr. X. However, you did get to a place where you were able to. Can you talk about initially what you thought of the United States before you even were detained, what you thought of the United States while you were detained, and afterwards, and now?
Sharon, thank you so much, and big shout out to your beautiful husband. And I think you are representing the soul of the good heartedness of American people. You and John and all those people I got to know. And I always say that because we say in Mauritania, the scout never lies. Because the job of the scout is not to lie, is to tell exactly what they saw. And I always say, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to bash Americans because, by and large, Americans I met are good people. And I mean, you're right, you're absolutely right that I really try to put a brave face. And Jean, one of the people I share with a lot of my private life, like 6 months ago, I almost died. I went to this state of catatonia because whenever someone assault me, like physically or verbally, I just go into this like catatonic mode, and I almost die. This doesn't happen often. So things like much lighter than that, like waking up and not being able to breathe, it's much more common. Or waking up and seeing people who aren't there. Like 4 or 5 nights ago, I woke up and I was so terrified in my apartment here in Groningen. I'm now in Holland, and uh, I just like I was so scared. So these things. So, but the healing begins for me with forgiveness, because when I forgive, when I forgave in the past, and when I forgive in the present tense, I feel this peace like washing over me. And you really need to mean it, because when you are not earnest about it, then it's not going to help you, because you just, it's just like repeating words. And knowing that I have no grudge, I hold no grudge against Richard Zuli, who led the team, who threatened to kidnap my mother, who sent people to Mauritania to interrogate my mother. Actually, he didn't only threaten, he sent teams to interrogate all my family. And I have, there is no benefit for me to see him suffering or to see his family suffering. None whatsoever. Just tell me one benefit I can reap from seeing any of those people, either him or Mr. X, or even Sydney, like because Sydney was the most. To this day, she does not want me alive. But you can also, Sharon, see that the pain is not coming from me, the pain is coming from the person who is holding this grudge. They are the one in pain, not me. If someone hates you, they are the one who are suffering, not you. And this is just amazing, to see this unfold. And I can tell you I'm very cool about it, and it's the responsibility of us, when this, very powerful countries turning their backs to democracy and human rights. It's up us to people to say, we are not accepting this. It's up to me and Steve to stand up and say, we don't hate each other. We don't hate each other. We want peace. We want the same thing for our families.
Thank you. Thank you for this amazing story.
So I have a question. So I'm Dick Price, her husband. So you've been to this horrible ordeal that's gone on for a long, long time, and really is almost unimaginable. The pain you must have suffered, and probably many people, as somebody said, would not be able to stand it. But looking forward, what do you have thoughts about? How you want to use your experience going forward to reconstruct a life for yourself and your family?
You're muted.
Sorry. So today I'm living in the Netherlands, Groningen, since 4.5 weeks, about 4.5 weeks. And I wrote a piece called Freedom. Just exploring the meaning, philosophical meaning of freedom. Because in this part of the world, people almost always equate freedom with freedom, political freedom, like the freedom to choose and to remove your political leader. But no one talks about freedom from hate, or freedom to forgive, and freedom to be a kind person. We have that freedom. Everyone could be a kind person, and there is nothing that can stop you from that. And just exploring this, and it was a very big success in spite of the pandemic. And I'm working on 2 other projects. Fortune, all those are plays in the Netherlands. Fortune, like the meaning of fortune in different culture, and Orientalism, Edward Said, based on the book of Edward Said. And that's, by the way, I write with other writers from Germany, and I have just to work with them online, because to this, like Jon said, to this moment in time, I'm banned. I cannot go there. And so I have to say the positive thing. So the fact that people who can make decision in the Netherlands, like the mayor of Amsterdam, they are like good people, and they are like standing up to human rights and standing up to America, standing up for human rights and standing up to America and bigger countries like Germany, who actually just repeating the lines of the US. And this is like so this is so disheartening that Europe, by and large, has no independent foreign policy. They just listen to America. If America tells them jump, they would say how high. I mean, even like we thought that France has independent foreign policy, they don't. This is so bad for the world. And I'm having a very good life, and my life is positive, because my life is I create my life every day, and I just choose to create the best life possible for me and possible for the world.
I have a quick question for you about, because, and I know that a lot of people have this question, is what gave you the strength to resist for 14 years in Guantanamo, because of course we are, as you know, this event and the movie we did and etc. is to force the US government to close Guantanamo. And honestly, I have great respect and admiration for you, because I think after 2 weeks, I would have tried to kill myself. 2 weeks in Guantanamo would have probably been plenty enough for me. So what gave you the strength? How did you find the strength to survive these 14 years?
I mean, Philip, I really, this is very hard question, and I really, to be honest, I don't know the answer. But I can tell you one thing, that survivors tend to be strong, because you didn't get to interview Dali War. Dali War died from the beating that I, along with other detainees, received. They just couldn't take it, because there is so thin line between surviving and dying, And I experienced like near death many times. And Gur Rahman died in the cold room. Those people, they don't know. One of the characters in that movie, the Marine, who was like very adamant and who wouldn't, who ended up not having the courage to talk. He is almost killed me in the cold room. The reason, because I refused to talk to him. I said, as long as you visit pain upon me, I will never talk to you. And I was like a stone. I didn't talk. But one day he put me in the cold room and he started pouring water over me. And then I felt, no, I need just to ask him to stop. But I couldn't ask him to stop because I couldn't talk. Like I was like frozen. I couldn't talk. And he thought, this is now a resistance. I need to break him. But I really wasn't like resisting at that moment. But he wouldn't know. He's not a doctor. This is not normal that you take a human being in chains and you just start visiting pain upon them. That's not normal human behavior, And I always thought, so what is the limit? And the answer, I believe, they don't know the limit. They don't know. They only would know the limit if you die, And so one of the thing also, like you guys all writers and intellectual. So one of the things that really amazed me and also helped me, I think, survive, is being exposed to this unfiltered, Americanness. So the way America looks at the rest of us. And it's not flattering, I can tell you that much. So they really see themselves as much more superior than us, and I don't blame them. Like they won all the war they want to, or, and they really never seen war since Civil War. America never experienced war. They always see like propaganda of war and the heroes coming back home, and this is so unhealthy. That people really don't know like that war is bad, because all they know is those very well written history textbook that are so that only saying positive things about America, and and nothing critical. There is nothing critical, because I read the textbook and I just would look at them and laugh. Because they look at me, they say, you're a bad person. I would say, why? Because you're a Muslim. You are fucking Muslim. And I laugh. I said, okay, I guess that's who I am. And this is like, it's almost like a fantasy of a writer or someone who observes to really, because you guys don't get to talk to this kind of people, because people always put filters when they talk to you, because what they call polite society. They will never tell you we don't like the French, because if they know you're French, they have to be polite to you. This, So I just want to make a comment about the very interesting character of Sydney. Sydney, I don't know, but I have the feeling when I talk to her that she's in a lot of pain. And this kind of losing control. And I go very farther with her. I tell her, I don't owe you the truth. I don't owe you to talk to you to begin with anyway. So I don't owe you anything. I'm not an American citizen, and you have no right to capture me, to kidnap me. And I don't owe you to talk to you, whether I'm the biggest criminal in the world. It's none of your business. I'm just not under your jurisdiction. I don't accept to be under your jurisdiction. And this loss of control, because this is so surreal. I mean, when I went to court, I was watching a horror movie, because there were two very strong group of lawyers discussing my fate. You know what they discussed? They were discussing AUMF. AUMF is the US president told them there are certain people on this planet that you can go and capture and put in prison forever. And they were discussing, did I belong to this group of people? That's what they discussed. What do I have to do with the United States of America? I don't know. What brought me there? Who is this president who can give orders to kidnap anyone on this planet? So, this Sydney, she was still drunk on this unlimited, unchecked power of the United States of America, where every country in the so-called free world went along. America said after 9/11, no one deserves human rights, except if your mother popped you in the United States of America. And we know that was a lie too, because they went after the Americans too. And France and Germany and and UK, they were applauding US. Yes, we don't have right. Yes, we don't deserve rights. I never understood this point of view. So she's in a lot of pain that to see that I am. But when she interrogated me in Guantanamo Bay, I had no choice. At first, I said, I'm not talking to you. But when she tortured me with her team, I talked to her. And she just doesn't understand that we have different premise. She has the premise that everybody owes an answer to the United States of America. I don't believe that. I do not believe that. I do believe that if you accuse me of something, I don't have to talk to you. You have to bring the evidence showing that I'm a criminal, and you don't need me, for that. If you bring that, then you can convince the judge, etc., etc. I believe in reconciliation, and I believe that only American people are the one who can close Guantanamo, because American people opened Guantanamo Bay, not the French people, not the Mauritanian, not the German. And only people, when you accepted for the government to disrespect people based on their cultural background or where they were born, you accepted that. And you need now to pressure the government to close this stain, because America is better than that. American people deserve better than military dictatorship in Guantanamo Bay.
Thank you. A couple of times I've heard it said that America is better than that. My people have 400 years of history that says maybe it's not better than that. But I don't know if we want to have any remarks from Mr. Goetz. If you'd like to weigh in on any of these questions that I have presented to Mr. Slahi.
Specifically, how do you think we should act to close the prison? Because that's the most important thing, because of course it's what Mohamedou went through, and all the other 700 people went through is totally unacceptable, but there are still 39 people there. And that we have to try to close it and free them as soon as possible.
I mean, one thing that's really quite interesting, if you think about it, if Mohamedou had been targeted by the US government in the period when Obama was president, right? When the drone wars began, Mohamedou would probably not be here with us, right? Because if you look at the level of proof that was used to target people, I mean, as they say, telephone numbers, are coordinates for us. I mean, if you look at the if you look at the level of proof, if you take Guantanamo as a measuring stick, there were over 730 or 750 prisoners originally, and there are what 40 now, and there are cases against 20, or just in terms of vague numbers. I mean, the targeting for the drones, if you look at that kind of recent New York Times story about all the civilian deaths, I don't know that that measurement stick of how good is their evidence has changed much, right? And I mean, what the Obama government, I think, really learned was that, the problem with Guantanamo is that, lawyers come, everybody gets a Quran, there's like an arrow in the cell, and they get halal food, and it's this kind of constant, unending political issue. And the solution of just executing people kind of politically made everything easier, right? And so I think it's important to talk about closing Guantanamo, of course, but the kind of alternative and the solution that's been presented, that we just take out people, that people just get executed without a trial, without any, is also something I think should be talked about.
So John, you have a unique perspective on this reporting from Germany, but it sounds like you're an American, so you have a perspective on America's behavior in Afghanistan, Iraq, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo. Do you have thoughts about another part to the story that you might want to look into? And then there's a question. This is the second time this question asked. Did Zuli respond after the interview to suppress his footage?
Well, I mean, I've always kind of concentrated on the kind of the German. I mean, I understand for your audience it's not that interesting, but Germany likes to play itself on the world market as this country of Enlightenment values, and and they're the kind of human rights defenders. And it's kind of, I've done a lot of stuff in the last 20 years about Germany's role in the Iraq War, doing targeting for the United States in Baghdad during the Iraq War. Germany's participation in kind of CIA kidnappings, and that's been kind of, I've always concentrated on Germany's role in that, because, and really when you look back over the last 20 years, and kind of what have we learned out of this whole idea that there's like a separate security system, and that Germany acts independently from the United States on anything, is just this isn't true.
Yeah. So, but the more important thing to follow up is, are you looking forward to investigating something else along these lines in your work?
Well, I'm actually really quite interested in the whole question of secret prisons. What was going on in the Trump period, and in the period kind of at the end of Obama. There were these kind of ships off the coast of Africa where they were, kind of temporary secret prisons. I mean, that whole, and I'm very interested in anything like kind of, because I don't think that these things just stop. They kind of have a life that kind of continue. So I'm really curious in trying to find out about, I did a big project that Mohamedou mentioned about AFRICOM, and the center of AFRICOM, the command center of AFRICOM happens to be in Germany. All African countries refuse to take it. And it sits in Stuttgart. So we've done a lot of work kind of looking at what is AFRICOM doing, and the way that they deal with prisoners. And, but again, I think one of the lessons of Guantanamo for them was executions, right? I think that's the, so you don't have people like me trying to find the path of the prisoners, finding the rendition flights and looking for all of that, because when you don't have a prisoner, you don't have a political problem, right? But that's interests me right now.
Well, here in the United States, there's a movement to abolish prisons. Obviously, domestically here in the United States, we've got a big prison problem with mass incarceration of more than 2.4 million people. I think the whole idea of abolition might be something that we might need to look at from a military perspective, not just close Guantanamo, but these other little sites that you're talking about, John. Well, we're getting to the end of the program. I'd like to offer each of you an opportunity to offer us some closing words. We can start with you, Mr. Slahi.
Yeah, all I'm saying, this is to me is a mission, you know. The fact that America and the Western world think of African people and Middle Eastern people as of lesser human beings need to stop. We deserve the same human rights. Western people lose their human rights, the more Western people lose their human rights. We just want to be treated with dignity and not to be kidnapped because we say something or we criticize the United States of America.
I have a little more question for you, if I may, which is, because we are talking about your movie, John's movie, I made one because I could not do, I was so fascinated by your book, Guantanamo Diary, when it was first published. I read the censored version and I read the uncensored version, but, it was both, as we know, and it became the Mauritanian. I wanted to know
It's a
because
beautiful book.
Yes, beautiful book. Movie, it's a different story. But I wanted to know what Mohamedou felt when he saw the film, and after that, because of course you had to tour and to answer a lot of questions about your experience and the book and the movie, etc., etc. What was your feeling about what people do not know about Guantanamo and about torture and about what the United States is doing, and what kind of education we should focus on to change that? So it's a two-part question.
You mean, what movie do you mean?
No, the Mauritanian. What did you feel when you saw the Mauritanian?
Yeah, so it was very hard for me to watch the Mauritanian first. It took me many months, but everything like you see, like in the Mauritanian, that actually happened in prison and more. And I always tell people, you cannot like put 20 years, at least 20 years, of suffering in a 2-hour movie, because 70 days, the first, when I was taken to the program, and I think Jean researched this very well. When I was put first in the program, the first 70 days, no sleep. I would be put in my cell for, I don't know, very few hour, sometime not, and then be taken right away to the interrogation, and I just lost it. I had no feeling anymore, and this was like very dangerous for them because I was not anymore useful to them. And the thing that people should know that, this whole like Guantanamo thing is there to break like people from this part of the world of resisting anything. You have to swallow everything that comes from America. When they say this is good, then it's good. You can never question them. And this is very dangerous because we want freedom. We don't have the same freedom that people enjoy in other parts of the world. And if we cannot question whether or not America has good intentions when they help this regime, choose to help this regime, and to oppress this regime, when we cannot question this, discuss it, and resist against it, then we are screwed even more than we are nowadays. America is not an angel, and we need to scrutinize its foreign policy, and it's not always standing up for human rights at all. I tell you one story that happened to me in Guantanamo Bay. And actually, I laughed so hard. I had like stomach pain because it was so funny. In 2012, I was watching, I wasn't watching, I could only hear Hillary Clinton talking. Someone was playing the TV. And, I have to be very honest. I like the way she talked because she's really very well spoken. And that does not to say the content of the speaking is very interesting to me, but that's the way she put together, she craft the words. It's really beautiful to me, at least. And then she was bashing China and China's human rights violation. And she was there, an angel, an American angel, saving this human rights lawyer, the blind Gwen. And he was deserving of salvation. He was, at least from what I heard, he was a good guy defending people in China. And she was saying something to something like China must abide by human rights and stop breaking law and treating people outside the rule of law. I said, what? Is this a dream? Is this like so blatant? Like it's, this is, how can you say this as an American official without even like blinking? I'm just official can never himself.
I just
Sorry.
wanted to add one thing was that, we wanted to have kind of more people who are responsible for this actually in the film. And in the process, we, of course, asked, like Rumsfeld was still alive at that point. And, we made, requests and wanted to talk to him. Is this okay? Yeah. And we wanted to actually go ring the doorbell at his house, right? And actually see if he would talk to us. And in the process of that, I found out, I don't know if anyone knows this, but during the period when Guantanamo was set up and he was defense minister or secretary of defense, he lived in a home that was called Mount Misery, which was actually a home in the 19th century that was used to break slaves. It was actually like kind of a center where you brought slaves who didn't behave. And that was the home that he lived in while he kind of ruled Guantanamo as, as the head of the Defense Department. I just thought that was an interesting thing. We wanted to include it in the movie in some way. And it just, as these things happened, it didn't work out. But I've always felt it was sad that we didn't have it in the movie because it's such an interesting point,
Yeah, it's a great story, and I would just want to add one line that I already said in the first part of the program, but I wanted to add to Mohamedou's story about Hillary Clinton. My favorite line that in the American history, one of my favorite line is a line by Henry Kissinger, who was very telling the truth in his own way. And he had this great line who said, international law and international convention that do not apply to the great power of the world, only to the small countries. It's clear, I think.
Wow. Well, thank you, Philippe Diaz, John Goetz, and Mohamedou Ould Slahi. What great
Thank you,
closing
gentlemen. Yeah.
and the irony of Mount Misery and then listening to Hillary Clinton scold China as you're sitting in a detention center in Guantanamo after being tortured. Unbelievable. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Yes. So yesterday, in a full-page advertisement urging President Biden to close Guantanamo, the ACLU wrote, Guantanamo Bay military prison is a catastrophic legal, moral, and ethical failure. It is a global symbol of American injustice, torture, and abuse of power. We promise to share with you an action that you can take. On your screen, you'll see an image. We're asking you to write a letter to President Joe Biden and to the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and Anthony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State. This is an example of a letter that we have pre-prepared for you.